My name is Olivia Hayes, and the first thing I remember from that night was the sound of glass breaking before I felt the sting of wine and blood running down my neck. The chandelier above flickered as if even the light was embarrassed by what it saw. I was standing in the middle of my brother's 38th birthday party, a sea of champagne silk dresses and laughter that felt borrowed. The marble floor was white polished to perfection, reflecting the glow of crystal and greed. My brother Andrew Hayes stood at the center of it all, holding a small silver key in his hand. He raised it like a trophy. For my little sister, he announced, his voice smooth and commanding. A BMW, finally something worthy of a Hayes. The guests clapped, cameras flashed, and for a moment I saw myself through their eyes, a lucky woman about to receive generosity from her successful, charming brother. But luck had nothing to do with it. I smiled faintly, took a breath, and said the words that would break the illusion. No, Andrew. I don't want it. The music stuttered like even the violinist missed a note. His smile froze, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. What did you say? I said I don't want it. I repeated, my voice calm but firm. I earn my own money. The guests shifted uncomfortably. My mother Diana tried to laugh it off. Oh, Olivia's just being shy. My father Robert sipped his whiskey with that quiet disdain he reserved for me. Andrew stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the cologne he wore for power, not elegance. You're embarrassing me, he whispered through his teeth. You think you're better than us now? I shook my head. No, I just don't want a car that comes with your control. Something in him snapped. His face flushed red and his hand moved faster than I could blink. The slap came first, a sharp, humiliating crack that echoed through the ballroom. Then the push. My heels slid on spilled champagne and I crashed backward into the dessert table. Plates shattered. The room gasped, but no one moved. Pain shot through my side, hot and deep. I tried to stand dizzy and felt the warm trickle of blood down my forehead. Andrew towered above me, chest heaving, eyes wild. You should have stayed quiet, he hissed. My mother screamed, but not at him, at me. Olivia, stop provoking your brother. My father slammed his glass down. Enough, he barked, but his voice wasn't directed at Andrew either. The guests froze, trapped between curiosity and fear, watching a family implode in slow motion. I tasted iron on my lips, the taste of humiliation. He hit me, I said, my voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother rushed to Andrew, cupping his face. It's okay, baby, you didn't mean it. She turned to me with disgust. You pushed him too far. That was the twist of the knife, not the pain in my ribs or the blood on my temple, but the sight of my parents hugging the man who had just attacked me. The room blurred, spinning voices fading into a dull hum. Somewhere, someone whispered, "Should we call someone?" Another voice answered, "Don't. It's a family matter." The marble beneath me felt cold, almost kind, holding me when no one else did. I looked up and saw my reflection in the mirrored ceiling, a broken image, small and shaking. For years, I had played the quiet daughter, the reasonable one, the one who never caused trouble. That night, I realized silence had been my cage, and I had decorated it with good manners. The security lights outside flashed as the ambulance arrived. Someone, maybe a waiter, had called them. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I saw Andrew leaning on our mother's shoulder, pretending to be the victim, tears glistening on his face. My father was already talking to a guest, explaining how these things happen. I wanted to scream, but the sirens did it for me. Their wail cut through the night, drowning out every lie, every excuse, every mask this family had worn. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the marble floor stained with red and gold, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for the mess. I felt awake. The sirens were fading when my phone began to vibrate against my palm. My vision blurred the ambulance ceiling swimming above me in waves of sterile light. My head pounded with every turn the vehicle took, each bump a reminder of the slap, the shove, the sound of laughter that followed. I could still smell the champagne on my skin. The paramedic, a man with kind eyes, asked gently, "Family, we can call for you, ma'am." Before I could answer, the phone lit up again. "Mom." I hesitated, then slid my finger across the cracked screen. Olivia. My mother's voice came sharp, controlled. Don't make a scene. I stared at the blood drying on my hand. He hit me, I said. He slammed me into a table. Mom. There was a pause, the kind that felt heavier than words. Then, you shouldn't have embarrassed him. You know how your brother gets when he feels cornered. My throat tightened. He could have killed me. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. Do you realize how this looks? There were reporters there. If the press gets hold of this, it will destroy Andrew's career and your father's reputation. I pressed the phone to my chest as if that could block the words from reaching my heart. The paramedic adjusted my oxygen mask, eyes narrowing. Family, he mouthed. I shook my head. No, not family. Mom, I whispered. I'm in an ambulance. Then get yourself checked out quietly. Don't sign anything official. Don't talk to the police. We'll handle it. Handle it. That phrase, how many times had she used it before? When Andrew crashed the car at 16, drunk and smiling, she said they'd handle it. When he punched a wall near my face in college because I said no to lending him money, she said she'd handle it. What she meant was bury it. I closed my eyes, letting the oxygen fill my lungs. The antiseptic burned my nose. My mother's voice softened that practiced manipulation she wielded like silk over glass. You know he loves you, right? He just gets overwhelmed. Please, Liv, don't make this worse. Something inside me cracked, not like glass, but like bone deep and painful. Worse, I repeated. I'm bleeding because of him. You're exaggerating again, she sighed. We'll talk in the morning. The line went dead. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. The paramedic spoke softly. You need to rest. I nodded, but my mind was already spinning. Rest wasn't possible when the truth kept screaming inside you. I'd always thought the worst thing was being hurt by someone you loved. I was wrong. The worst thing was being told it was your fault. The ambulance pulled into the hospital bay, red lights painting the walls in violent strokes. As they wheeled me out, I tried to hold the phone, but my hand shook. It slipped and clattered to the floor, leaving a small smear of blood across the metal. That sound, tiny final, was louder than the sirens. In that moment, I realized something I'd never admitted even to myself. I was alone. Not the kind of alone that comes from distance, but the kind that comes from truth, the kind that strips away illusions. I thought of my father's expression, cold, measured as if he were calculating how to turn this into a legal advantage. I thought of my mother's trembling act, her tears, always for Andrew. I thought of every time I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. And I thought of how peace had never protected me. The gurney rolled past the ER doors, the world turning into fluorescent blur and antiseptic scent. The nurse asked for my emergency contact. For the first time in my life, I said, no one. She paused, her pen hovering. Are you sure? I nodded. My voice came out steady, surprising even me. Yes, I'm sure. The nurse looked at me for a moment longer, then simply wrote something down and gave me a faint, understanding smile. Behind her, I could hear the hum of hospital machinery, the rhythm of survival. Somewhere, someone else was crying. Somewhere, someone else still believed their family would come. I didn't. The stretcher rolled into an empty bay, and the curtain closed behind me with a soft hiss. It felt like the first honest silence I'd ever known. The hospital ceiling had those speckled tiles that looked like snow caught in gray sky, and as I stared at them, I realized how familiar that stillness felt. My entire childhood had been built on silences like this, polite, suffocating, controlled. The kind of silence that hides bruises beneath designer clothes and anger behind family portraits. When people met the Hayes family, they saw elegance, a father with courtroom charisma, a mother who hosted charity galas, and 2 children who smiled on command. They didn't see the cracks that ran through the marble floors or the way love in that house was currency traded only when it made someone look good. I was 7 when I learned that truth. Andrew had stolen money from my piggy bank, just quarters, but it mattered to me. I cried, and my father told me not to start drama. He said Olivia, men make mistakes. Don't provoke him. My mother added softly, you know your brother's sensitive. Sensitive. That word became a weapon. Every time Andrew failed, exploded, or hurt someone, it was because he was sensitive, and every time I reacted, I was ungrateful or cold. I began to shrink myself to fit their expectations, to smile through anger, to lower my voice when Andrew raised his. By 12, I had learned that the only way to survive was to be invisible. Andrew thrived under their spotlight. He was loud, charming, entitled. He crashed cars, failed classes, made promises he never kept, and somehow every mess turned into another chance for my parents to prove how forgiving they were. I worked hard, straight A's, no complaints. At dinner, my father would brag about Andrew's potential, then glance at me and say, "And Olivia's doing fine too." Fine. That was my title for years, the fine daughter. When Andrew dropped out of college, they called him passionate. When I got a full scholarship, they called it luck. The difference wasn't performance, it was gender and expectation. Andrew was allowed to fail spectacularly because he was male charismatic and their pride. I was expected to succeed quietly because I was female reserved and convenient. The irony was that I believed them. I believed being quiet was noble. Being patient was strong. I believed my worth depended on how little trouble I caused. When I turned 23 and moved out, I thought distance would save me. I got my own apartment, a small one-bedroom overlooking downtown, and started working as a junior accountant. The job didn't pay much, but it was mine. For a year, I felt almost free. Then my father called one evening with that voice that sounded like an order disguised as concern. "Liv, we're refinancing the house," he said. "We need your signature to speed up the paperwork." I hesitated. "Why me?" "Because you're responsible," he said simply. I didn't realize it then, but I had just signed myself back into the cage. My name became tied to their mortgage, my credit attached to their debts. Every month after there was another family emergency, Andrew needed a loan, my mother needed help with taxes, my father needed me to handle things. They praised my reliability while draining it dry. When I tried to refuse, my mother's voice would tremble. "Do you want us to lose our home?" So I worked longer hours, skipped vacations, and convinced myself I was protecting them. The truth was, I was enabling them. Andrew's temper didn't end with childhood. At family dinners, his insults came wrapped in jokes. Olivia's the kind who'll die alone but with perfect accounting records. Everyone laughed. I laughed too because that was the rule laugh or become the problem. But that night at his birthday party when I said no to his BMW, it wasn't just about a car. It was about every no I'd swallowed for 32 years. It was about every time I'd been told to keep peace while he shattered things. That was the night I stopped being invisible. As I lay in the hospital bed IV attached to my wrist, I thought about that pattern and how carefully it had been built generation after generation of women, told to be small so men could feel big. My grandmother used to whisper to me at Thanksgiving, "Don't challenge your brother. Men bruise easily." I hadn't understood then. Now, I did. It wasn't his ego that bruised easily. It was their illusion. The illusion that our family was perfect, that power meant respect, that love meant obedience. I stared at the beeping monitor beside me, watching the green line spike and fall. For the first time, I saw my heartbeat not as proof of life, but as defiance. Every pulse was a quiet rebellion against decades of silence. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't go back. The Hayes family thrived on control, and control only works when the victim participates. I wasn't going to participate anymore. Morning came slowly filtered through the blinds like pale ribbons of light that couldn't quite reach me. My head throbbed where the stitches pulled against my skin, and my ribs ached every time I breathed too deeply. The nurse's shoes squeaked softly on the tile as she checked my vitals, her presence quiet but steady. "Do you have anyone coming for you?" she asked. I hesitated, staring at the blank space where family should have been. "No," I said finally. She gave a small sympathetic nod as if she'd seen this kind of loneliness before. After she left the room, fell back into that strange, heavy quiet that hospitals seem to collect a silence full of stories people don't say out loud. My phone was on the side table, cracked but still glowing faintly. No new messages, no calls, nothing from my parents, nothing from Andrew. I picked it up anyway, half hoping for an apology, half dreading another command. The only unread message was from Leah, a co-worker and the closest thing I had to a real friend. Heard what happened. I'm coming. I didn't respond, but a single tear rolled down my cheek before I could stop it. Not because of pain, but because someone cared enough to show up. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. A doctor with tired eyes confirmed I had a mild concussion-fractured ribs and bruising consistent with assault. Would you like us to contact the police? He asked carefully. The word police hung in the air like a dare. I opened my mouth but couldn't speak. My parents' voices echoed in my mind. We'll handle it. Don't make a scene. I shook my head. Not yet. The doctor nodded but looked unconvinced. He signed my chart and left quietly, leaving behind the faint scent of antiseptic and resignation. I tried to close my eyes, but every time I did, I saw it all again, the slap, the shove, the crash, the silence. I saw my mother holding Andrew like he was the one who'd been hurt. I heard her whisper, "You shouldn't have provoked him." I'd replayed that moment 100 times already, looking for a reason that made sense, but there wasn't one. Abuse never made sense. It just repeated itself until someone refused to play along. The door creaked open and Leah slipped in, still in her navy scrubs hair, tied back, eyes red from crying. She sat on the edge of the bed and reached for my hand. They told me what happened, she said softly. I looked away. They'll say it was an accident. They always do, she said, her voice steady, but it wasn't. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of machines filled the space between us like a low, constant heartbeat. Then Leah said the one thing no one in my family ever had. You didn't deserve this. The words hit harder than the blow had. I turned toward her, tears blurring my vision. He's my brother, I whispered. He's supposed to love me. And your parents were supposed to protect you, she said. But love without accountability isn't love. It's control. Her words sank deep, echoing against the hollow spaces my family had carved in me over the years. You have to report it, Liv. Don't let them bury this. I wanted to say yes, but fear clung to me like a second skin. You don't understand. My father's a lawyer. My mother's connected. If I go against them... Leah squeezed my hand. Then you finally stop being their shield. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded napkin. On it, in her neat handwriting, was a name, Amelia Grant, attorney at law. She's good, Leah said. She helped my cousin with a domestic case. Call her. Just don't let this disappear. She stood, gave my hand one last squeeze, and left. The napkin sat on the tray beside my lunch next to untouched Jell-O and half-melted ice. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. For years, I had let them rewrite the story. I had let them decide what was truth and what was weakness. But now there were medical records, photos, witnesses, proof that couldn't be twisted into family gossip. As the sky outside turned from gray to gold, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger yet. It wasn't courage either. It was something quieter, sharper. Resolve. I picked up my phone and opened a new contact. Amelia Grant. I didn't hit call yet. I just stared at the number until I could breathe without shaking. The napkin's edges curled from the warmth of my hand. Somewhere down the hall, a child was crying, and a mother's voice soothed them gently. I thought about my own mother and how her comfort had always come with conditions. Don't make this worse, Olivia. I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered, no more silence. The following morning began with the low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint beeping of monitors, a rhythm I had grown used to. The pain in my ribs had dulled into a heavy throb that matched the pulse in my temples. I had stared at Amelia Grant's number all night, my thumb hovering over the screen, but never pressing down. Fear had always been the leash my family used to keep me quiet, and after 32 years, it still worked too well. But silence was another kind of wound it festered. By 7 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I hit call. It rang twice before a calm professional voice answered. Grant Law Office, this is Amelia. I swallowed my throat dry. My name is Olivia Hayes. I need help. There was a pause, not of impatience but of attention. Tell me what happened, she said. Her voice was steady, firm, but not cold. I told her everything, or as much as my trembling could manage: the party, the slap, the shove, the hospital, the call from my mother. Every word made my chest ache, not from pain, but from remembering how much I'd tolerated. When I finished, she didn't respond right away. Then she said, "Olivia, I want you to listen carefully. What happened to you isn't a misunderstanding. It's assault. You have the right to press charges, and no one, not your parents, not your brother, can stop you." "They'll deny it," I said weakly. "They always do." "Then we'll use proof," she said. "Do you have photos? Messages? Medical records?" "I have the doctor's notes," I replied. "And my friend Leah saw me after. She knows what happened." "Good," Amelia said. "That's more than enough to start." I hesitated. "I don't want revenge." "This isn't revenge," she replied. "It's protection." Her tone softened. "You don't have to be ready for everything right now. You just have to be ready to stop bleeding quietly." Something inside me steadied at those words. "Okay," I said finally. "What do I do?" She walked me through each step: filing a formal police report, documenting injuries, transferring copies of my hospital files. She asked if I had financial ties to my family. I told her about the mortgage, the shared account, the payments I'd been covering for years. "We'll cut those ties too," she said. "They've been using your stability as a leash. That ends now." By the time we hung up, the fear hadn't disappeared, but it had a shape I could face. Amelia had turned chaos into a checklist, panic into strategy. I emailed her everything: the medical discharge papers, the photos Leah had taken, even the old texts from my mother blaming me for Andrew's tempers. Each attachment felt like I was peeling away another layer of control. Hours later, Leah came back to the hospital with coffee and a change of clothes. When I told her about Amelia, she grinned. "Good. That woman doesn't play." "Neither do they," I said quietly. Leah placed the coffee in my hand. "Then it's about time they met someone who does." That afternoon, Amelia visited in person. She was younger than I expected, late 30s maybe, but carried herself with the calm authority of someone who'd walked through fire and learned to make it bow. Her navy suit was sharp, her voice sharper. "I spoke with the hospital administrator," she said. "We've started your report and filed a request for the police to review your injuries." I felt a flicker of panic. "My parents will find out." "Good," she said simply. "Let them. The truth doesn't need their permission." She sat across from my bed, tablet in hand. "Tell me about the BMW." "It was a gift," I said bitterly. "Or a performance. He likes to make gestures that prove how generous he is. But there's always a cost." Amelia nodded. "Then this wasn't about a car. It was about control." I stared at her. That's exactly what it felt like. "And now," she said, "you're taking it back." She handed me a folder with several forms marked "Statement of Incident." I signed each page, my hand shaking less with every stroke. When I finished, Amelia said, "Once this goes through, they'll try to contact you. They may show up here. They'll try guilt first, then anger, then shame. Don't respond to any of it. I'll handle everything." "Why are you helping me?" I asked softly. She smiled faintly. "Because I've met too many women who thought silence was survival. It isn't. It's surrender." That night after she left, I stared out the hospital window at the city below. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably crafting their narrative how Olivia was fragile, emotional, overreacting. But this time, their version of the story wasn't the only one being written. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet daughter. I was the witness, and I had just found my voice. 2 days later, the rhythm of the hospital had become almost hypnotic. The soft shuffle of nurses, the distant hum of ventilators, the click of my IV pump every few seconds. I was beginning to believe the calm might last when the door opened and the air changed. My father entered first. Crisp suit, silver cufflinks, the smell of power and aftershave preceding him like armor. My mother followed, clutching a box wrapped in pastel paper, her expression rehearsed into sorrow. And behind them came Andrew's sunglasses on, despite the fluorescent light hands shoved into his pockets like a defiant teenager, instead of a 38-year-old man who'd put his sister in the hospital. My stomach clenched. I could feel the bruise under my ribs pulse harder. My father spoke first, his tone low, measured. "Olivia, we're here to put this unpleasantness behind us." I didn't answer. My mother set the box on the bedside table. It's banana bread, she said softly, as though baked goods could patch a fracture. You always loved it. I stared at it without touching it. Andrew stood near the window, glancing everywhere but at me. My father continued, We've spoken to the hospital and the police. I've explained that this was a family misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I repeated, my voice calm, but shaking from the inside out. You call what he did a misunderstanding. My mother reached out her tone, dripping pity. Sweetheart, you were upset. Andrew didn't mean to hurt you. He's under a lot of stress lately. He attacked me, I said slowly, every syllable tasting like iron. Andrew finally turned his jaw tight. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You know how that makes me look? You hit me, I said again louder. My father's expression hardened. Enough. You're not helping anyone by exaggerating. You've already caused enough damage. I looked from one to the other and felt something shift a line inside me, snapping cleanly. Do you hear yourselves? I asked. He puts me in the ER and you're worried about reputation. My mother's voice trembled, that familiar manipulation. We're worried about you, darling. You're fragile right now. No, I said. I'm clear. The door opened again, and Amelia stepped in her presence, cutting the tension like a blade through silk. Good afternoon, she said briskly, closing the door behind her. I'm Ms. Hayes's attorney. My father's composure faltered. Attorney, he repeated. This is a private family matter. Not anymore, Amelia replied. She set her briefcase on the chair, her voice calm, but carrying. Given the assault report and hospital documentation, any further attempts to pressure my client could be considered witness intimidation. My mother's face drained of color. We're not intimidating anyone. Then I'm sure you won't mind leaving, Amelia said pleasantly. Andrew scoffed, stepping forward. You think a few papers make you powerful? Amelia didn't even look at him. No, Mr. Hayes, she said. Facts do. She handed my father an envelope. You'll find copies of the restraining order and notification of asset withdrawal. Olivia has revoked all shared financial agreements effective immediately. Any attempt to access her accounts or property will result in legal action. My father's hand trembled as he unfolded the papers. This is ridiculous. She doesn't understand what she's doing. She understands perfectly, Amelia said. She's choosing herself. My mother clutched the banana bread like it could save her. Olivia, please don't do this. We're family. I met her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see a mother. I saw a woman who had built her peace on my silence. Family doesn't mean covering up abuse, I said. Family doesn't mean blaming the one who bleeds. Andrew stepped closer, his voice rising. You're ruining us. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm freeing myself. Amelia nodded slightly, her eyes meeting mine in approval. This conversation is over, she said firmly. My father opened his mouth to argue, but Amelia was already holding the door open. Please leave. They hesitated, stunned, but something in her tone allowed no defiance. My mother was the first to move, tears streaking her makeup. Andrew followed, muttering under his breath, his anger barely leashed. My father lingered last, turning at the door. You'll regret this, he said quietly. You're throwing away your family. No, I said. I'm finally choosing one that doesn't hurt me. The door shut behind them with a soft click that sounded louder than the slap had days ago. Amelia looked at me, her expression unreadable. That was the hardest part, she said. From here, it gets cleaner. I sank back against the pillow, the tension leaving my body all at once. My chest hurt. My head pounded, but somewhere deep inside, something new had started to grow, an unfamiliar, fierce kind of peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being alone. That night, sleep refused to come. The fluorescent lights outside my room buzzed like angry insects, and every sound, the squeak of wheels in the corridor, the distant hum of voices, felt too sharp, too awake. I stared at the ceiling, the events of the day looping in my head. My parents' faces, Andrew's fury, Amelia's calm defiance. It felt unreal, like I had stepped out of my own story and watched it play on a screen. Yet the pain in my ribs and the stiffness in my jaw were proof enough I wasn't imagining any of it. I picked up my phone. A cascade of notifications blinked across the screen, 37 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a flood of text messages, all from numbers I knew too well. I opened one from my mother. "Please don't do this, Olivia. You're tearing us apart. Andrew's devastated. You don't understand what he's going through." Another from my father. "This behavior is unacceptable. If you don't retract your statement, you'll leave us no choice but to act legally." And Andrew's written like a threat disguised as apology. "You've always loved attention. Congratulations, you finally got it. Hope you're happy." My hands trembled as I scrolled, heart pounding with a mix of rage and heartbreak. Then I stopped at one message from an unknown number. "You did the right thing. No name, no context. Just those 5 words." I didn't know who sent it, but for some reason I believed them. I put the phone down and stared out the window at the city lights bleeding into the fog. Maybe somewhere out there was another person who had stood up to their own kind of family storm and survived. Maybe that was enough to keep me breathing. The next morning, Amelia came back, her hair pulled into a low-bun tablet in hand. "They've retained counsel," she said without preamble. "They're trying to claim this was a mental health episode, that you're overreacting, and that Andrew needs treatment, not punishment." I let out a humorless laugh. "Of course they are." "Let them," she said calmly. "We're not fighting for their version of the truth. We're fighting for yours." She handed me a document. "The restraining order's been approved. They're barred from contacting you directly. If they try, send everything to me." I nodded, the weight of that paper heavier than I expected. "How long until court?" "A few weeks," she said. "We'll be ready." After she left, Leah came by with flowers and coffee that smelled like home. "Your story's everywhere," she said quietly. My stomach tightened. "What? Someone leaked it," she said, showing me her phone. There it was, my life reduced to headlines: "Prominent lawyer's son accused of assaulting sister at lavish party." Photos from that night splashed across the screen: the chandelier, the marble floor, the shattered glass. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. The internet already knew. "They're calling me a liar," I whispered. "Half of them," Leah said. "The other half are calling you brave." I scrolled through the comments, each one like a punch or a hug. She probably provoked him. Classic jealous sibling. If she has proof, she should show it. Good for her for standing up. This happens in rich families all the time. I put the phone down before the noise drowned me. "I didn't want this," I said quietly. Leah's voice softened. "You didn't cause it. He did. They did. You're just the first one who didn't stay quiet." The next few days passed in a haze of headlines and paperwork. Amelia prepared statements, shielded me from calls, and told me the police had officially opened an investigation. Andrew's lawyer released a public comment, a private family disagreement blown out of proportion. My parents released one too. "Our daughter is struggling emotionally. We ask for privacy." That line hit harder than the slap ever had. Struggling emotionally. It was their favorite way to erase me by painting me unstable. But this time, the world was watching. I didn't hide. I posted a single photo on my social account, my hospital wristband, the faint bruises still blooming across my arm, and the caption, "Silence protects no one." Within hours, thousands of strangers had commented. Some offered love, some shared their own stories. Some just said, "I believe you." For the first time, I realized that the family I had lost wasn't the only kind that existed. There were others out there, people who had been gaslit, ignored, blamed. People who had been told to stay quiet, and they were finding me the way light finds cracks in closed doors. I turned off my phone and exhaled. The war had started, yes, but it wasn't the kind I feared anymore. This one wasn't about survival. It was about truth. The courthouse smelled like old wood and tension. The day of the hearing arrived with a cold wind that whipped across the marble steps, tugging at my coat and reminding me how exposed I was. The bruise under my hairline had faded to a shadow, but every time I touched it, I felt the memory pulse beneath my skin. Amelia walked beside me, papers in one hand, coffee in the other, her calm presence cutting through my nerves like a metronome. "They'll try to rattle you," she said quietly. "They'll bring up your childhood, your family history, maybe even your finances. Don't defend yourself. Just tell the truth. The truth doesn't need defending. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, but the air felt thick enough to choke on. Andrew sat across the aisle, his suit sharp, his posture practiced. His lawyer whispered in his ear, while my parents sat behind him, both in black, as if mourning the image of the family they'd built. When my eyes met my mother's, she didn't look away. She just shook her head slowly, disappointment weaponized like it always had been. The judge entered and the room rose. My knees trembled as I sat again. Amelia's hand brushed mine briefly. "You're okay," she murmured. "You're ready." The first hour passed in legal language and procedure. Statements, objections, exhibits. Then it was my turn. I stood heart pounding. The oath felt heavy in my mouth. When I began to speak, my voice was small at first. I told them what happened, the slap, the shove, the fall, the silence. I told them about the years of manipulation, the gaslighting, the money, the control. As I spoke, something shifted inside me. The fear didn't vanish, but it turned into clarity. I wasn't talking to the court anymore. I was talking to every version of myself that had stayed quiet for too long. When Andrew's attorney cross-examined, his questions dripped with suggestion. "Isn't it true, Ms. Hayes, that your brother has supported you financially over the years? He attached my name to their debts," I replied. "That's not support, that's leverage. You've had disagreements before, haven't you? Family arguments? Disagreements don't end with CT scans." The room murmured, the judge tapping his gavel once for silence. "Ms. Hayes," the attorney continued, "you refused a generous gift. Could it be said that you provoked the incident by saying no?" I said. "If saying no provokes violence, maybe the problem isn't the word, it's the person hearing it." Amelia smiled faintly beside me. Andrew's jaw tightened. He looked at me like he used to when we were children, and I dared to tell the truth at the dinner table. That same mixture of fury and disbelief. He couldn't stand that I wasn't shrinking. My father took the stand next, his voice smooth as polished stone. "My son is a good man," he said. "He's made mistakes, but this was an accident." "An accident that fractured her ribs?" Amelia asked. He hesitated. "She fell. Because your son pushed her. He was defending himself, against what exactly?" Amelia's voice was calm but cutting. "Against his sister declining a car." My mother began to cry, then soft but deliberate. "We're losing our family," she whispered. "Is that what you want?" "Olivia." Her words twisted something sharp in my chest. "No," I said quietly. "I wanted a family that didn't hurt me." When it was over, the judge called a recess. Amelia led me out into the hallway where the noise of lawyers and footsteps blended into a dull roar. "You did perfectly," she said. "You spoke truth to their theater." I leaned against the cold marble wall. "Do you think they believed me?" "It doesn't matter," she said. "You believed you." We returned for the verdict that afternoon. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Given the medical evidence, witness testimony, and recorded phone calls submitted by the prosecution, the court finds sufficient grounds to uphold the restraining order and proceed with criminal charges against Andrew Hayes." The words hit like thunder, echoing in the chamber, bouncing off years of disbelief. My mother gasped. My father's face went rigid. Andrew cursed under his breath. "I didn't move. I just breathed," the judge continued. "Furthermore, the court acknowledges a pattern of coercion and emotional abuse supported by documentation. Financial entanglements between Ms. Hayes and her family are to be legally dissolved." Amelia squeezed my hand. "It's over," she whispered. But it didn't feel over. It felt like the moment before sunrise, quiet, fragile, waiting to see if light would really come. As we stepped out into the crisp air, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, names were shouted. Amelia guided me past them, her voice low. "Don't answer. You've already spoken enough truth for one lifetime." I looked up at the sky, pale blue and trembling, and whispered to no one in particular. For once, they have to listen. The story didn't end in the courtroom. It began there. By the next morning, my phone was drowning in notifications. Clips from the hearing were circulating online, me on the stand, my voice steady as I said, "He hit me," frozen in a dozen headlines. "Heiress breaks, silence on family abuse. Lawyer's daughter defies legacy. justice in the Hayes household. I hadn't planned to be a symbol, but the internet decided otherwise. Strangers sent messages from everywhere: California, Ohio, even London. Some shared their own stories, others just wrote, "Thank you for saying it out loud." But with the empathy came venom. My family's friends called me ungrateful, dramatic, a disgrace. Anonymous accounts accused me of ruining a good man's life. The world was watching our dysfunction unravel, and every opinion was another cut I didn't ask for. Amelia warned me it would happen. Truth costs something, she said, but silence costs more. My father tried to contain the damage with statements to the press. "Our daughter has suffered from emotional instability," he said in one interview. "We love her, and we hope she seeks the help she needs." It was classic Robert Hayes, eloquent cruelty dressed as concern. My mother followed suit, her voice trembling on a morning talk show. Families go through challenges. Olivia just misunderstood. I sat on my couch, watching the segment, a mug of untouched coffee cooling in my hands. Misunderstood. That word had become their shield, their favorite lie. The reporter asked if Andrew would serve time. My mother's lips tightened. "He's in therapy," she said, as if that erased the violence. The next day, Amelia's office called. "We've received the settlement offer," she said. "They're offering public apology, full repayment of your financial contributions, and agreement to drop all future claims if you withdraw criminal charges." I froze. They want to buy silence again. They want to restore the illusion Amelia corrected. "What do you want?" I thought of the marble floor, stained red, the slap echoing through a room full of people who said nothing. I thought of the nurse asking, "Do you have anyone coming?" and me answering, "No one." "I want accountability," I said, "not compensation." "Then we reject it," Amelia said simply. "And we do it publicly." That afternoon I recorded a short statement with her firm. No tears, no theatrics, just truth. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. Abuse is abuse, even when it wears a suit and calls itself family. Within hours, the video spread across social media, played on evening news, shared by advocacy groups. Hashtags formed. Stand with Olivia. Family does not excuse abuse. It was surreal watching strangers fight for me when my own bloodline never had. The backlash hit my parents harder than they expected. My father's firm issued a statement distancing themselves from his personal conduct. My mother's social charity paused her events pending internal review. And Andrew, once the golden boy, was photographed leaving his luxury condo with a face twisted in fury. For years, he'd thrived on admiration. Now even that was crumbling. Still, victory didn't feel like joy. It felt like mourning. I wasn't celebrating the downfall of my family. I was grieving the idea that it could have been different. That night, Leah came over with takeout and wine. We sat in silence for a while before she said, "You know, this is bigger than them now." "I didn't want it to be big," I said. "I just wanted it to stop. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster," she said softly, "is to make sure everyone sees it." She wasn't wrong. The noise didn't fade overnight. Reporters camped outside my building. Old acquaintances reached out with apologies that sounded like guilt management. My aunt called crying, saying she'd always known something was wrong. I didn't answer her messages. They had all known, and no one had done anything. I received one more letter, handwritten, postmarked from the prison intake center. Andrew's handwriting was unmistakable, bold, and impatient. "You ruined everything. I hope you're proud of yourself. They'll never forgive you, and neither will I." I folded the letter once, twice, then dropped it in the trash. Forgiveness wasn't my goal anymore. Freedom was. Later that night, I stepped out onto my balcony. The city glowed beneath me, restless and alive. Somewhere out there, someone else was gathering the courage to speak. Maybe my story wasn't just mine anymore. Maybe that was the point. As I watched the lights flicker across the skyline, I realized the real victory wasn't that they had fallen, it was that I had stood. Weeks passed, and the noise began to fade, but silence had changed its meaning for me. It wasn't the suffocating quiet of my childhood anymore, it was peace, deliberate and chosen. The court had finalized Andrew's sentence, 6 months in a rehabilitation program, followed by probation, community service, and a restraining order that would last for years. My parents' reputations had unraveled quietly. My father took an indefinite leave from his firm, and my mother disappeared from the charity circuit. For the first time, their names didn't shadow mine. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but what I felt was strange lighter, yet hollow, like walking after a storm when the air still smells like rain. I spent most mornings at a small cafe across from the park, sipping black coffee while watching strangers pass. Sometimes I'd catch myself expecting my phone to buzz with another crisis, another demand, another apology that wasn't one, but it didn't. The quiet was its own kind of healing. Leah joined me most mornings, sometimes talking, sometimes not. She understood that not every wound wants to be spoken about. "You look different," she said one morning studying me. "Like you finally exhaled." I smiled faintly. Maybe I did. Amelia kept in touch, checking on my progress with the legal disentanglement, new bank accounts, new apartment lease, a fresh start built on my own name. She told me she was proud of how I handled everything. "You didn't just survive, Olivia," she said. "You dismantled the structure that kept you silent." Her words stayed with me for days. I'd lived so long defining myself by endurance that I'd forgotten survival isn't the same as living. One evening, I went back to my old apartment to collect the last of my things. The place felt foreign, now sterile, haunted by echoes of who I'd been. On the fridge, there was still a photo of me and Andrew from years ago, taken at our parents' summer house. We were smiling, then our arms around each other, pretending to be close because that's what people did for cameras. I took it down, turned it over, and on the back in my mother's handwriting were the words, "Family is forever." I almost laughed. Forever had ended the moment truth entered the room. I tore the photo in half and left it on the counter. As I packed the last box, I realized I didn't hate them not anymore. Hate meant they still controlled space in my head. What I felt now was distance, the kind that comes with clarity. They had built a world where love meant loyalty at any cost, even your own safety. I had simply stopped paying that price. Back at my new apartment, I unpacked slowly, placing things where they felt right, no one else's preferences, no one else's approval. The walls were bare, but they were mine. I hung a single photo above my desk, a snapshot Leah had taken of me the day after the verdict. I wasn't smiling exactly, but there was something steadier in my expression, a quiet defiance that said I made it. Late that night, I stood by the window looking out at the lights of the city stretching endlessly. Somewhere out there, my parents were still rewriting their version of events. Somewhere, Andrew was learning to perform remorse for parole officers. But none of it mattered anymore. The truth had its own pulse, steady and unstoppable. I opened my journal when I'd started in the hospital and wrote, "Freedom isn't loud. It's the silence that no longer scares you." As the words dried on the page, I felt something like forgiveness, but not for them. For myself. For every version of Olivia who thought peace was earned through obedience, who believed endurance was strength, who mistook love for control. I closed the journal and whispered into the quiet, "You're safe now." In that moment, I knew this was what real freedom felt like, not revenge, not applause, just stillness without fear. It wasn't the ending I had once imagined, but it was mine. Winter melted into spring, and with it the version of me that had once measured life by survival began to dissolve. I found new rituals, small ones that anchored me. Every Sunday morning I walked to the park with a thermos of coffee and watched the joggers, the children, the couples with their dogs. The world kept moving, ordinary and unbothered, and somehow that steadiness felt sacred. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter after Leah introduced me to the director. The first time I stood in that room listening to the quiet shuffle of women and children who had fled their own versions of hell, something inside me clicked. They didn't need pity. They needed to be seen. The director, a silver-haired woman named Nora, handed me a stack of intake forms. "You don't need to fix anyone," she said. "Just listen. Most of them haven't been heard in years." That line stayed with me. Listening had always been my curse, but here it became purpose. The stories were hauntingly familiar. Daughters blamed for sons' tempers, wives told to keep peace mothers who stayed for the children. Every time someone whispered, "They said it was my fault," I felt that old ache rise, but I learned to breathe through it. Pain, when shared, became less suffocating. Leah called it poetic justice, turning wounds into witness. Amelia helped me register a small nonprofit under my name, the Hayes Project, though I still flinched at using that last name. "Reclaim it," she said. "You've rewritten what it stands for. We built it quietly, a fund for legal aid therapy and relocation support for victims of family-based abuse. Donations came in waves after my public case. I never asked for fame, but if the spotlight could illuminate something good, then maybe it was worth the burn." I gave my first speech at a fundraiser 3 months later. The crowd was small, but attentive faces lined with empathy and anger. My hands trembled around the microphone, but my voice didn't waver. For a long time, I said I believed silence was noble, that keeping peace meant being good. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's prison. And prisons don't need bars to hold you. When I finished, the applause felt different. It wasn't the hollow kind my family used to give the performative clapping of people maintaining an image. This was raw, real, human. After the event, Nora hugged me tightly. "You're giving people back something they lost," she said. "Hope I asked." "No," she smiled. Language. The words to name what happened. That night, I walked home through the quiet streets of downtown, the city lights reflecting in puddles left from a brief rain. My breath fogged the cool air, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was walking towards something not away. When I reached my apartment, I found a letter slipped under my door. No return address, just my name, written in familiar handwriting, my father's. I stood there for a long moment before picking it up. Inside the letter was short. "Your mother and I saw the interview. We hope you're well. We didn't understand before. Maybe we do now. If you ever want to talk, the door is open." I folded it slowly. No anger left in me, just a quiet acceptance that some doors weren't meant to be walked through again. I burned the letter over the kitchen sink, watching the ashes curl and scatter. Closure wasn't forgiveness. It was knowing you could leave the door closed and still sleep soundly. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, thinking of the women at the shelter, of Leah's laughter, of Amelia's relentless strength. I realized I had built something my family never could, a life not built on fear or image, but on truth. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. The wind rattled softly against the glass, and for once the sound didn't make me flinch. It felt like applause from the universe, quiet but proud. I whispered into the night, "I'm still here." And for the first time, that felt like enough. A year later, the past felt like a dream I'd woken from too suddenly to remember clearly. There were still days when echoes returned the flash of marble, the taste of blood, the sound of my mother's voice calling me dramatic, but they no longer defined me. They passed through like ghosts, acknowledged but powerless. Life had rebuilt itself quietly, not in grand gestures, but in the small, steady rhythm of ordinary peace. My mornings began with sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains, with the sound of the kettle whistling, with plants thriving on my windowsill. I had learned that safety wasn't a fortress. It was a routine you could trust. The Hayes Project had grown beyond what I imagined. We now had 2 lawyers volunteering full-time, a small staff, and an entire network of survivors who spoke openly about what once felt unspeakable. We didn't just share stories, we rewrote them. Every week, I led a small support circle. Women sat in mismatched chairs, hands trembling as they spoke their truths for the first time. Some cried, some laughed. All of them healed piece by piece. It wasn't therapy, it was testimony. Leah was there too, running logistics and occasionally teasing me for being too serious. "You're turning into a leader," she said once. "I didn't plan to." "That's the point." She smiled. "The best ones never do." Amelia became more than my attorney. She became my ally, my friend, my mirror. When the anniversary of the trial approached, she sent me a short message. "You turned pain into power. Olivia, that's the definition of justice." I printed it and pinned it above my desk. Justice. That word used to mean punishment. Now it meant peace. Andrew never reached out again. The last I heard, he'd moved to another city, keeping his head down, staying out of the headlines. My parents stayed silent too. I imagined them growing older in that grand house filled with secrets, pretending the world hadn't shifted without their permission. I didn't wish them harm. I simply wished them honesty. That was punishment enough. On the anniversary of the attack, Leah insisted we celebrate not what happened, but what came after. She brought cake candles and a small group from the shelter. We laughed, we cried, and when they asked me to say something, I stood there for a moment looking at the faces around me, the women who had chosen survival, the friends who had chosen truth, and said, 1 year ago, I thought survival meant silence. I thought strength meant enduring. But real strength is refusing to disappear. It's saying no even when your voice shakes. It's standing up even when you're bleeding. The room was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. The sound grew until it filled the space not as noise, but as affirmation. Later, when the candles burned low and the guests drifted out, Leah lingered by the door. "You realize what you've done right," she said. "You didn't just survive your family, you ended the cycle." I looked out at the night sky beyond her shoulder, the stars faint but steady. "I didn't end it," I said softly. "I just chose not to carry it." After she left, I walked to the park, the same one where I'd gone after leaving the hospital months ago. The air smelled like spring damp earth and new beginnings. I sat on a bench beneath a blooming tree, watching the petals fall like soft confetti around me. Nearby, a little girl laughed as she tried to catch them, her mother smiling close by. The sound was pure, free of fear, and it filled me with something I hadn't felt since childhood hope without hesitation. I thought about all the Olivias still out there sitting in silence, believing they were the problem. I wanted to tell them what I had learned, that the moment you stop apologizing for existing is the moment you begin to live, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of laughter through the trees, and I closed my eyes. I could still feel the scar on my forehead when I brushed my hair back, but it didn't sting anymore. It was proof not of what had broken me, but of what I had survived. I whispered into the night, not to anyone, but to everyone who needed it. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to begin again. Then I stood the city lights glowing behind me, the world wide and open. For the first time in my life, the quiet didn't mean danger. It meant freedom, and I walked into it unafraid.